Welcome to The Joy Factor, a podcast dedicated to helping you create a path to joyful living each and every day. We're sharing inspiration from real people combined with practical tools you can use to unleash the playful and joyful spirit already inside you. Now, here's your host, therapist, life coach, and yoga teacher, Julie Hansen.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Joy Factor podcast. So today's guest is Cat Pantaleo, and she is from the nonprofit Feet on the Earth over in Boulder, Colorado. I was thrilled to take the Joy Factor on the road for this one. What a treat to talk to Cat about the importance of nature in our lives, smack dab in the middle of one of the most beautiful parts of the United States. So Feet on the Earth is an organization dedicated to connecting youth with nature. Cat describes this program and talks about how spending time in nature is a quick way to directly connect us to our capacity for joy. I know this is true, and I bet you do too. But Kat's words really struck me at the core because I see connecting with nature as a central aspect of bringing more peace to individuals and to communities as a whole. If we could bring a bit of nature into the life of every child, just imagine how powerful that would be. Cat also talks about the wisdom keepers and how important our elders are. And that's a whole nother piece of this that's just so important. And I really am looking forward to your feedback as you listen in to today's interview. So enjoy. Welcome to the Joy Factor, Cat Pantaleo. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Julie. It's a pleasure.
All right, Cat, I really want to start out by talking a little bit about your organization that you're here to talk about today, Feet on the Earth. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, it's a local nonprofit run by Lorene Wapatich, who is the founder and director currently. And it is an amazing thing to be a part of. Kind of one of the things that, it's really hard to describe in one sentence, but it's really about building community from the earth up. We, myself, the director, the other mentors involved, we work with youth programs primarily, but it definitely involves the families, the parents, the elders in the community. It's really about building community and nature connection. And there's a lot that goes along with that, but that's kind of the basis and the foundation. There's a lot of different programs. We run homeschool programs. We run summer camps and after-school programs. And they're all outside, regardless of the weather. And we bring in a multitude of skills. There's a focus on kind of the ancestral skills. Some people call primitive skills. So we teach and model and inspire basket making, fire by friction, carving, plant love, love of plants and trees. And, the list goes on, to be honest. There's just so much that you can do. And, really what we focus on, there's a lot of different programs out there that focus more on the scientific aspect, and we certainly bring in the identification, and we really focus on the local species, but it's really about connection, because if connection through connection to self, connection to nature, and connection to others. So that's kind of always there in any program that we do. So it's through the connection with nature that one becomes connected to oneself and to other people, and that community aspect is highlighted. So it's not just about the skills. The skills are what initially engage the children and the adults alike. But it's really through those skills that there's so many unnamed skills and just really important aspects of development, mental, physical, emotional, spiritual development that comes into play.
Well, and when we look at sort of the research behind happiness and we think about what are the ingredients that are needed, even though you're not, advertising as like a happy camp for kids, like you are advertising, we're going to build a container of community. We're going to help the natural unfolding of finding meaning and connection. And we're going to do that in nature. Like those three, those things are just that foundation that makes it possible for people to be happier and to have lives that, bring them joy. Tell us about some of these kids and families. Like, what have been the things that you have noticed with your work in terms of how you see the children blossom or grow within this context of being in a natural setting?
So I've been involved with Feet on the Earth doing this work for about 4 years now. So I have had an opportunity to see children over those years grow and develop. And yeah, some of the change is really profound. There is a lot of research that points to the critical importance of nature connection with growth and development in youth. And part of that is what you spoke to, just connecting with oneself through nature and ultimately creating a container that where each individual's gifts are explored and brought out to the surface. It's almost like the soul's unfolding because, I truly believe that we as humans each come into this world with a very unique story and with gifts to offer. So it is about finding that meaning and finding a purpose. I mean, certainly, it's a lifelong journey. At 13, we're not going to know what our purpose in life is necessarily, but it does the connection gives meaning, which is deeply profound and connected with joy and happiness in one's life. It gives some sort of direction and some sort of guidance. And without that, a lot of us are kind of lost on our journey. There's one child that I think of in particular in the program that although I didn't work in his group, the homeschool program is divided up into clans, which is actually pretty cool. And, the younger ones are co-ed, and then once they kind of reach adolescence or pre-adolescence, research actually shows that, development happens, and emotional safety and all of that is more important to keep the genders separate, if you will. So I didn't have a chance to work with this one particular fellow, but he is now, I believe, 14. So I've seen him, and been witness to his growth and development over the past 4 years. And I'm just moved deeply to witness the thoughtfulness, the consideration. There's this kind of peer mentoring that we foster in the programs. And, we do it in such a way that it just happens naturally. We don't tell them that this is how they have to do this or that. But just what I see in this youth is just a genuine desire, innate desire that's coming forth to be of service and finding meaning in that and actually finding joy in that. So, just to see him with the younger kids and, we have a couple of elders in our community that come and visit and tell stories and, the wisdom holders. That's a big part of traditional community that we are definitely cultivating and bringing back. And, just greeting the elders. I mean, not even needing to be told, but, offering a gift or getting a chair or, just making sure that people are taken care of. And that awareness, I think, is a lot of times what's lacking in our youth today. This past year, I worked with a group of 7 and 8-year-olds who happened to be all boys, which was very challenging, to say the least, but very sweet at the same time. And I just saw little changes. They're small, but it's all relative. I see them kind of coming into themselves with this beautiful container that we hold for them. That's this balance of keeping it contained, but also really letting them explore and letting nature be a teacher, which honestly, everything we need to know and everything we need to be joyful human beings is outside in nature. So we just do our best to bring that all forth and inspire them to connect and want to learn more.
You mention the ancestral piece, and as you're talking about the wisdom holders, I wonder if you might just comment a little bit more on our ancestors experienced nature in a whole, they experienced it in a way that we just don't because of the life we're living. And that piece about, leaning on the expertise and the wisdom of our ancestors, but also maybe honing in on a particular aspect, which is the rites of passage. Could you talk a little bit about, or maybe tell us about an example of a rite of passage that is woven into the program?
In traditional cultures, the elders were, and being an elder is not just about getting older, right? You can age and get older and not necessarily hold the role of an elder in community. And the difference is that an elder, as a youth, has the experiences of being guided in a community to, as we mentioned earlier, kind of unfold their soul story and their purpose and find meaning and their gifts and offer that to the community. And in our human journey, there are always trials and tribulations, and we learn from them. So being an elder is really about going through the unfolding of your journey and, learning from that, healing the wounds, getting the support that you need. And in that is rites of passage, which I can talk to in a moment. And then being in a place when you're older, having reaped this knowledge, having gone through life's journey with open eyes and an open heart, and being able to offer your wisdom. Like, you've seen it, you've been there, and being somewhat of a person who people come to for counsel. And it's really, it's kind of a tragedy in a way, because our culture today, there seems to be this epidemic of forgetting, whereas elders are really, their role is about remembering what's important in life and what is important to sustain a healthful, joyful, meaningful community and culture. So the rites of passage piece, that's a really integral part of traditional cultures all over the world, and still is in place in many, many places. And there are certain times, and there's a lot of research, like developmental research, developmental psychology, and just the importance of, what humans actually intuitively know, which is that there are certain stages of life that are huge transitions, both physically, spiritually, emotionally, things, your position in your community, right? Your role. So one of those actually happens right around 7 or 8. The other one at kind of adolescence, which is kind of the one that we're most familiar with, going from adolescence into, quote, adulthood. And then there's another one, depending, that's somewhere, I think, right around 40 or 50 maybe, just life transitions where things shift. And so Feet on the Earth we're literally just bringing in that piece of Rites of Passage. In fact, the first one is taking place this summer, next month, where there are going to be, I think, 4. There's going to be a community gathering together, sending them off. And they prepped this whole last school year for this, and they're going to go out for a solo night and sleep in a shelter that they themselves made, and have their food and their water, and I think they each get to take a couple of things with them, and they need to choose, are you going to take a knife, or are you going to take a blanket, so it's really, and of course the staff is going to be nearby and checking in on them. So anyway, a rite of passage is really, it's a ceremony. And it's a marking of a transition into adolescence, into this place of recognizing that your role as a human in your community is, like, what is that role? What are you going to offer? How are you going to be of service? And so it's an opportunity to really connect deeply with yourself. And what better place to do that than in nature? Because in nature we have connection. We have all of life going on as it is, beautiful in whatever form it's in, and reflecting that back to you. I mean, it's really amazing to spend time in nature because at least in my experience, it really does instill this sense of I belong here, which is truly what we all desire on a very deep level, to know that we belong and to know that we have something to offer. And so the Rites of Passage is this ceremonial occasion that definitively marks that, that supports and celebrates you as a human being with your gifts unfolding whatever they may look like.
You're blowing my mind over there, like seriously. So,
not quite what you expected?
No, I mean, I just am thrilled.
Yeah.
Wow. So, and there are listeners out there who are thinking, okay, what do I do next? I don't live in Boulder. I don't live near the woods, but I want to be able to, go down this path. Do you have suggestions or ideas for folks to just get started with exploring, nature a little bit more closely in their lives and in sort of intentionally providing that for their kids?
So Feet on the Earth is, our programs and our philosophy are modeled after the Wilderness Awareness School, which is in Washington State, founded by a man named John Young, who is an amazing naturalist. And he was mentored by Tom Brown Jr., whom a lot of people have heard of. And Tom Brown Jr. had the good fortune and fate of being mentored by a Native American elder. The Wilderness Awareness School actually has correspondence courses, naturalist training correspondence courses. It's called Kamana. There's 4 parts. I've done the first 2, and I have found them to be incredibly helpful in connecting me with my place, because it's all around the knowledge of place. At least it starts there, to really get to know where you live intimately. Who's there? Once you really start, say, one of the core routines, if you will, is called Sit Spot, where you basically, and honestly, I make it really easy. I just sit on my deck. And, you do a core routine, you do Sit Spot every day, maybe start with 5 minutes. I know life is very busy and it's hard to fit one more routine in sometimes, but, work your way up. Maybe, next month it's 10 minutes, then it's 15, then it's 20. And you would be amazed at who's your neighbor. Foxes, squirrels, skunks, all kinds of birds. And you don't need to live near the woods or in the woods or necessarily urban areas. Even right in the cities, there is an amazing amount of wildlife there. It just is a matter of slowing down, sitting in one place, opening your eyes and your ears and your other senses, and observing. And I will say that there's a lot of audio tools available through the Wilderness Awareness School, and kind of an introductory audio series is called Seeing Through Native Eyes, and that's done by John Young. And it's really helpful. And, if people are inspired enough to do that and listen to the tapes and, or the CDs and follow some of the recommended exercises. Otherwise, I just recommend getting outside. Spend, if you have an office job or, you spend a lot of time inside, sit outside for 5 minutes a day. Just sit still and see what you notice. Breathe deeply and just increase your awareness. See what you see, hear what you hear. And the longer you sit, the more you'll see and hear. So it's pretty exciting. I actually hadn't really been aware that there were Cooper's hawks. So Cooper's hawks are a type of kind of bird of prey, if you will, that live almost exclusively in urban areas. And, they hunt songbirds, which is kind of a sad thing on one level, but, everybody's got to eat. And once I became aware through somebody else telling me that they saw them all the time, I started becoming aware of them. Well, I've got to sit outside and see these. And sure enough, the more I sat out and, with the awareness of that, the more I saw. So get outside.
I love that so much. And I have to tell you, like when you're talking about the birds and just who are your neighbors, there are a couple of birds that live on they don't live on they hang out on the, I guess the electrical wire, like right outside my office window. And I can see them very busily living their lives, building nests. And it's so much fun to sort of tap into that. As a way to, I think we're pretty good at kind of ruminating and thinking about things that maybe worry us. We probably could get a lot better at having those sort of positive daydreams where you do just sort of tune into the life of a bird and you cultivate that curiosity. And that is the other thing that's coming up is that, just how powerful curiosity can be. When you talk about this, it's just so fun for me that I'm here live with you in Boulder. So excited. And this is my first face-to-face interview. But I love how your eyes light up when you talk about this. Like I'm listening and, watching, and I can see that sparkle in your eye. And I wonder what drew you to this initially? What was it about? You probably could have chosen many directions to put your time into. Why this?
Well, sometimes I feel like I didn't really have a choice. Like this is really my destiny. And I'm still on my journey, actually, because it's always shifting and changing. But I feel like I've always been on this path of nature and service. And even though as a youth I wasn't aware or cognizant of this idea of being of service and contributing, but it certainly is how it's unfolded. Fortunately, I grew up in an area that had some wild places. There was a lake and, we had trees and there were fields. And so I had quite a bit of unstructured outside time, which, there's a lot of research actually. If you're not familiar with Richard Louve's work, No Child Left Inside, it's actually kind of a movement. Really, it's kind of a dense book, but he illuminates the research that validates the critical importance of nature connection and just being outside, and specifically, at least in one part of the book, the importance of that unstructured play for kids in nature and how incredibly important that is for their development, both physically and emotionally. So I had the good fortune of having quite a bit of that as a youth, and came time to I graduated from high school, in the area where I grew up, and in my family, it was just kind of expected, like you go to college and So I applied to college, and the only thing I was actually really kind of interested in were the sciences. So I ended up studying biology, and then, my life is also, which is what, the study of life, right? So I've kind of been on that path all along, and I've traveled a little bit, and, I worked a little bit with fisheries biology, and then, the work I was doing wasn't all that fulfilling. So I literally got called to come to Boulder and study botanical medicine. The plants were definitely, speaking to me, if you will, because I can't think of any particular instance or study or exploring that I did that led me to it. But I literally, so like I woke up one morning and I need to study botanical medicine. And so I started looking into schools. I was living in Washington State at the time and found the school in Boulder and came here and studied. And interestingly, one of my instructors, the anatomy and physiology instructor in my first year of botanical school, was Lorraine Wapatich, who is the Feet on the Earth director. So it's just interesting how these little connections just come into one's life and lead us where we need to go. She left to go get her master's in education and do more of this nature awareness studying on the East Coast in Vermont. And then I actually ended up taking over her instructor role at the school and teaching anatomy and physiology. And she came back to Boulder and was doing these programs formerly called Her Feet on the Earth, because it was just with young women, and now it's Feet on the Earth. And we just got reconnected, and I, again, kind of like the botanical medicine, I was literally drawn. Like, it's such a passion of mine to be outdoors, and to be outdoors not just with children. I mean, that's primarily who I'm working with, but it was literally a calling that I have answered, and it's hard work, but anything that we're passionate about is worthwhile. And usually it's hard work, nothing really comes that easy.
So can you share with us just some daily practices that you do for yourself that you think might be useful to our listeners who are maybe wanting to, build more joy into their lives through kind of simple steps that they can easily do?
Well, as a devoted bird friend, I really encourage and invite people to listen to the birds. The birds actually tell us a lot of what's going on around us. And the Wilderness Awareness School that I spoke of earlier, one of the traditions that we have adopted, because it was actually given to us by one of the elders, Jake Swamp, is called a Thanksgiving address. And so the Thanksgiving address was incorporated and utilized anytime people got together. And the first thing that they would do is acknowledge that they were grateful that they all arrived safely. And gratitude is one of those practices that can bring us into the present moment and connect us with what's important and what's meaningful. So that is certainly one practice that I recommend, but I digress, because where I was going with that, all the different levels of life that contribute to our lives are acknowledged. And so it starts with the earth and goes to plants and insects and trees and birds and other humans and ancestors and stars and so forth. And all the seen and unseen things are acknowledged for their contribution to us and our vitality and our joy and our healing. And the birds in the Haudenosaunee tradition, which is where this comes from, the birds' quote purpose was to lift the hearts of humans.
Okay, Cat Pantaleo, I cannot tell you how happy that it makes me to be able to have had this conversation with you today. Can you tell us, I know that Feet on the Earth is a nonprofit organization. If people want to learn more or kind of find out how they can support you, what are the best ways to contact you and find you?
Yeah, so if you search on Facebook Feed on the Earth programs, our Facebook page will come up. We also have a website, feedontheearth.org, which will list all of our programs, and you can find out, you can get information on our staff, on our vision. We're also running a crowdfunding campaign. We would greatly appreciate any support that you could give us in our work.
And I will definitely list all of these resources on the show notes for today's episode. And you can find all of that, of course, on the joyfactorpodcast.com. Thank you so much for coming today, Kat. Love talking to you.
Thank you so much.
How cool is Cat Pantaleo? I am still thinking about all the wisdom she shared and how important the work of Feed on the Earth is. As I mentioned earlier, it's a nonprofit, and if you feel called to make a donation to support the work that they're doing, please visit thejoyfactorpodcast.com, and you'll find a link for the Feed on the Earth Fund Me page. You'll also find plenty of other resources that Kat mentioned on the show today. And I really spent quite a while on the Wilderness Awareness School page and just found it to be fascinating. There's a bounty of information for youth and for adults on really practical, wonderful ways to connect with nature. There's so much negative energy in the world, and so many of us struggle to know what can we do in the face of anger and hatred and fear. And of course, those are joy stealers. Some of us try to shout over the voices of those that we disagree with, and other people shut down and just disengage. I don't think there are any easy answers to the challenges of life, but I do think it's time to put out a call to action. Find time in nature. Go into the woods. Listen to the birds. As Kat says, it doesn't take more than a few minutes to connect with nature no matter where you live. The other day, I didn't actually make eye contact with the fox, but I definitely stood for a moment and watched the fox that appeared kind of along the tree line by my house. It was just a powerful moment to observe wildlife in action, living their life and doing what they do, and just taking that moment to kind of imagine, and be a part of that there's not really any words that you can describe that with, but I think that it's moments like those where if I hadn't been standing there looking out onto that tree line and just taking a moment to do that, I wouldn't have seen the fox. And I wouldn't have seen, the birds that I see or heard the songs of the birds. So it just takes a moment. It doesn't have to be an elaborate production. If you're already doing this, you know what I'm talking about, and you know how beneficial it can be. But if you're not doing it and you really are kind of zooming by those opportunities just to get from point A to point B, I would really encourage you to stop and just make time for it. Also, if you enjoyed the show today, please let me know. Go to thejoyfactorpodcast.com and leave me an honest review. I really appreciate that feedback. And if you want to send a little joy out into the universe, click that share button. And as always, thank you for listening and have a wonderful day.
Thank you for listening to The Joy Factor. For more information, visit www.thejoyfactorpodcast.com.